Hi, welcome. My name is Naima, and today I want to talk about Brick Lane by Monica Ali. I picked this book up initially because I was looking for more books written by South Asian authors or minority authors, something I could relate to. And I found this. Our author, Monica, she is a British Bangladeshi woman. She was born in Bangladesh and moved to England when she was 3. Fun fact, I was born in Pakistan and moved to Canada when I was almost 3. This book was really popular, I guess, in 2003. It was shortlisted for the Man Booker Prize 2003. They also made a movie about it. I watched the trailer. It didn't appeal to me, so I didn't watch it, but I did still end up reading the book. So anyways, I'm excited to talk about it. So for the purposes of this review, I'll start by giving you a quick summary of the book, which, heads up, if you do read the back of the book, there is a little bit of a spoiler in it. I will put it up on the screen now if you do want to read it. But, you know, if you're interested in reading the book and not having anything spoiled or know anything about the events that take place, I wouldn't read the back of it. After my summary, I'll give you some analysis of the characters, the themes that keep coming up in the book. Then I'll share what I liked and disliked, potential book club questions, and then I'll give you a final rating out of 5 of the book. Lastly, if you get to this point in the review, I will share what I'm currently reading now and what I'm excited to share for the next video. So the book is about our main character and told entirely in her perspective, Nazneen, who is 18 when she has an arranged marriage to a man older than her, much older than her, named Channu in England. She then moves over to England to Brick Lane in Tower Hamlets, East London. A large Bangladeshi community is already present there and she joins that community. The book essentially follows the next 13 or so years of her life and all of the experiences that she has, or obviously whatever can fit into this book of experiences that she has with the community, with different characters in it, with her own husband, things that she kind of has to endure, and how she ends up finding her own voice by the end of it. The big other character other than Nazneen that we'll meet in this book that takes, her own plot and has her own sort of story going on is her sister Hasina, who when she was 16, just a couple years younger than Nazneen, ran away with, her boyfriend or whoever, and she still lives in Bangladesh. We find her story, Hasina's, through letters that she sends to Nazneen. These are scattered throughout the book, and again, over that 13-year period, we see how Hasina grows and how she changes, the trials and tribulations that she goes through as well. So our main character, of course, is Nazneen. She is, as Channu said, a simple girl from the village, totally unspoiled, all of these things. This is what she says. This is what Channu says about her when he's speaking to a friend just a couple of days after they get married and she moves over. Nazneen is someone who doesn't want to test fate. She is concerned that everything that's going to happen to her is already written. Everything that's, meant to happen is going to happen regardless of what she does. She doesn't believe she has any power, especially in the beginning. Obviously, throughout the book, we see how that might change and the things that lead to that change. Again, she's married to Channu, who I thought was probably the funniest character in the book. I'm not saying he was always the nicest guy or the funniest guy, but he also mentions in the end of it where he says, I know I haven't been perfect, but I've always been, not that bad. And I just thought he was so funny. He's someone who is always talking about all of the plans that he's got, all of the things he's going to do. He's doing all of these calculations of like, when I get this, I'm going to do that, but he doesn't actually have anything. He's the guy who's going like, big things are coming, yeah, big things, but nothing's actually coming because he doesn't actually do anything for it. So he was really funny. Like I said, the other big character in this is Hasina. Hasina is a lover girl. She just wants to be loved. She's so soft-hearted and it feels like she keeps getting taken advantage of, and she's innocent but in like a dumb way. So I really liked Hasina's character as well. It felt like she just had bad luck. There was also, of course, the characters that were not quite side characters, but there were characters in the book that were just part of the Bangladeshi community. So there was Razia, who I really liked. Razia was described in the beginning as, she sat like a man, she dressed like a man, she vaguely even looked like a man, and she was a Bangladeshi woman, of course. She, you see how she ends up being the person to influence Nazneen in kind of taking back her power, or taking her power for the first time, because Nazneen, it seems like, never had any power in the first place. But she's very strong and she's strong-willed. She doesn't really care what anybody thinks. She was a cool character. Mrs. Islam, she is an older woman who is very in with the community. Like, she seems to have gossip about this person and that person. She'll come around and visit. She'll tell you how to live your life. She's very judgy and also a bit of a predator. So we don't like her. And then there's a guy, Kareem, I don't know how you're gonna say it, but you meet him kind of closer to the end of the book, and he starts off as just a regular guy, like someone who is Bangladeshi, British, more so on the British side, doesn't really speak Bengal that well, but seems to really, really connect with his roots. But it feels like that's coming from external pressures of like racism and stuff like that. But I also wonder how much of that is, in fact, racism, and how much of that is in his own mind. Obviously, I didn't live in England in 2003. I can't tell you what the sort of experience, I'm not even Bangladeshi, I couldn't tell you what the Bangladeshi British experience was at the time, but according to Kareem, it's horrible. But what I really thought was interesting was by the end of it, it feels like Kareem is becoming more and more like Jennu, which is really funny because he starts off as this guy who, again, is going to do all of these big things, but he's actually making things happen. But then by the end, it just feels like he's regressing. So that was a bit of a sad ending of his. So the themes that this book explores, I think, are two big ones. One is going to be fate. So obviously, as a Muslim, you believe that everything is written, your story has been written before you were even born. I personally have not done the research on this, so I cannot tell you what, the answer to this is, but one of the big conflicts for Nazneen is, to what extent are your decisions your own? To what extent is something that happens to you, your own fault versus something that was meant to happen to you, something that was destiny? To what extent do we have control over our own lives? And then the other thing, or the other theme that I would say is Nazneen's struggle to determine what she owes herself and her own desires versus what she owes the desires of other people, and to what extent she has to play this role of like a mother, a wife, all of these things despite the fact that she wants something else. Like, how do we balance the two? What I liked about this book was, firstly, I liked Hasina's story. I liked the way it was written. I liked the letters. I felt like they were a succinct way to tell what was happening in her life without bloating the story too much or turning it into two books. Though, however, I do actually think if this was written into two books with just Nazneen's story and then like maybe a couple of letters of Hasina's like sprinkled in there, and then another book that was Hasina's story with a little, letters by Nazneen sprinkled in there, or even like a second book that was just Hasina's perspective with like letters coming in from Nazneen, I think that would have been really cool. I didn't like the length of this book. I felt like a lot of course there was a lot of things happening, there was a lot of story, there was a lot of different events. I don't feel like every single one of them was necessary. I also feel like there was a lot of descriptors of scenes, the feelings, all of these things. There was a lot of like in her own head thoughts and things like that I felt like were not really necessary. At the same time, though, I can see how, obviously, being someone who's in England for the very first time, having grown up in a village in Bangladesh, maybe these are things that she would think, maybe these are things that would be really important to her and really meaningful. I just didn't feel like I needed all the descriptions. I also really liked the writing in the book. I felt like some of the ways that the author talked about, an expression of feelings, an exchange of communication without verbalizing it, that was really, really well done. One thing I also didn't like was the way that Kareem and like the whole incident with him, it felt like it kind of came out of nowhere. Like, it wasn't really gradual. It was just this one-off decision, which maybe that's how it happens. I didn't like it. I didn't like the Muslim representation as well. That's probably my biggest gripe with it, is that in this entire story of all of these characters that are so fleshed out, all of these different stories, all of these different things happening, there wasn't one person I could point to and be like, she was a Muslim woman who was happy. She was a Muslim Bangladeshi, British woman who enjoyed her life. Her husband was good to her. Her children were good to her. Her children were at least nice enough. Like, it just felt like everyone had, like, all of the Muslim women had some sort of sad story, or they were just a villain. So, I don't know, didn't love that. In a book club, I might ask, who do you relate to more, Hasina or Nazneen? Because like I mentioned, they seem like two very different individuals. Again, by the end of it, it's very different from the beginning of it, but throughout the book, you can see how they're different, how they make different decisions, and how they, to some extent influence each other, but not really. They kind of live their own lives. They just tell each other about it. Another question I would ask is, what do you think actually happens to Kareem? Obviously, I've given you my perspective that he kind of ends up regressing, but again, we only see his life up until a certain point, up until the end of the book. He's probably got another 40, 50, 60 years left. So who knows what happens to him. Maybe he finds a girl, falls in love, has a family, I don't know. But personally, I think he's gonna end up like Jennu. Also, if this book club has any Muslims in it, I would probably ask what you thought of the book and its representation. Kind of, is all representation good representation? I would argue probably not. I didn't actually like the Muslim representation in this book. I felt like all of the Muslim women were unhappy, they were oppressed, they just wanted to be without their husbands, and I don't know, maybe it wasn't, you know, it wasn't explicitly said that it was with religious reasoning. It was the fact that they were Muslim, and I just wish that there was, you know, maybe one Muslim woman who was happy with her husband and lived a good life. But I don't know, what did you think? I think the target audience for this book is probably South Asian women, if not just anybody who wants to understand immigrants, South Asian immigrants, Muslim immigrants, Muslim women immigrants. I think that the story did a really good job of telling anybody outside of this community about the community, how it works, how, you know, the role of gossip, the role of women and men, and the role of children. All of these sorts of things I feel like are explored and explored well. Ultimately, I'm going to give this book a 3 out of 5. I think if you want to read a story about a Bangladeshi immigrant in London, I think this would be a good read. This doesn't need to be said, but this isn't accurate to every single Bangladeshi British woman who lives in London. You know, not every man is going to be like, you can't learn English. So, I don't know, just be mindful of that if you're going to read it. But otherwise, the story was really good. Hasina's story especially, like I said. Hope you enjoy it. So, thanks for making it this far. I'm currently reading Really Good Actually by Monica Heisey. So far, I'm really enjoying it. I'm about halfway through. It's really funny. But stay tuned. We'll see how it goes, and I can't wait to tell you all about it. Bye!